Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today we are going to talk about Web 3.0 and this is Web 2.0, and we are going to discuss on a high level about Web difference between both of these. My name is Sagar. I'm investment manager at BlockRocket. I'm so happy to have you here. Before we start with our amazing panel of speakers, I would like to take care of some housekeeping things, which is so as this event is online, everyone will be muted. So feel free to scan the code and join our WhatsApp group. If you have some question, I would be happy to take some of the questions later on. And the event will be 1 hour live session. And after the event, we have really exciting things here. As you can see, the Gather network is also part of our panel event today. So we have arranged special networking session after the panel event, which is going to be in the Gather platform. And we have already sent out the few selected our viewers. So you should have get email in your inbox and you are invited there. So feel free to take the opportunity to be there. So as everyone here, I would like to take some opportunity to talk about BlockRocket. We are early stage startup investor. Our main focus is European region. We invest into pre-seed and seed stage blockchain-based startup. Our ticket size is €500,000. After the investment, we also provide our portfolio startup with matchmaking, marketing, advisory, and mentorship. This is a few selection of our portfolio startup. You can see here. If you need more information about them, feel free to check our website or feel free to reach out to us. And of course, if you're building something from your garage and trying to disrupt the next big thing in blockchain space, feel free to apply to our website, www.blockrocket.io, or feel free to keep in touch with us. You can reach out to us via email or LinkedIn. So we are ready to go. So today we have a great lineup of speaker in our panel event. And so I would like to start with the introduction. So let's start with I would like to ask our speaker to start with their introduction. So I would like to ask first Brent Milliken from Chainlink Lab. Brent, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, great. Thanks, guys. My name's Brent Milliken. I look after business development here in Europe, specifically focused on enterprises in large institutions. My own background in the Web 1, Web 2 world was I started in the mid-90s building websites. So based on use case of a simple marketing brochure, quickly moved on to building an internet for one of the major oil companies as a knowledge system. And then my third use case in the Web 1 world was building an online bank for one of the major Dutch banks. In the Web 2 world, it was more interactive, let's say learning, blended learning, how to create course catalogs and specifically support, let's say, channel players. And then moving on to sort of the licensed box product that Microsoft had with Office, moving that into digital distribution with Office 365 into the cloud and things like that. And now Web 3 with Chainlink, working on different use cases, trying to build a world based on cryptographic guarantees. So look forward to being part of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is Tim. He's also CEO and co-founder of Wendley. So Tim, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, indeed. So I'm Tim. I'm one of the 4 co-founders and CEO at Wendley. Wendley is a blockchain technology provider, more specifically for Web 2 businesses to tap into Web 3 technology. We support metaverses to build a metaverse using our technology. We cover wallet, NFT, and marketplace technology. And it's really for the onboarding of mainstream users to the specific application or the game.
Thank you, Tim, for the introduction. Moving further, we have Satya from GatherTown.
Everyone, I'm Satya from GatherTown. Think of GatherTown as like Pokemon meets Zoom. We're building the metaverse where anyone, anywhere in the world can have opportunity. And at GatherTown, I'm focused on remote work and some of our Web3 customers. We have a whole host of Web3 and a lot of interesting things to talk about today. Some background, previously dove deep into Web3 with the MIT Bitcoin Club. And so super excited to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Satya, for joining us. Going further, last but not least, we have Tejas from Netflix. Tejas?
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with such esteemed and honored people around me. I am an engineer at Netflix. So my day job is Web 2, effectively, but I have a passion for Web 3. So I have self-taught myself about Web 3. I talk about metaverse, especially focusing on the social aspects. How would inclusion, diversity, and some of the social constructs that we have around us look in the metaverse or in Web3 world? That is what I'm focusing on right now. So very pleased to be here and join everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Tejas, and thank you all of you for joining us today. So I think Web3 has recently burst into mainstream consciousness, right? So everyone is talking about metaverse, from industry leader across the traditional tech sector and blockchain ecosystem, weighing in with wide range of perspective on the past and future of internet. So let's start with what actually is the Web3. So I would like to ask Brent, can you please briefly and maybe you can explain in simple definition what is Web3 and why does it matter?
Well, I think Web3, represents obviously the next stage of the internet, but specifically from Chainlink's perspective, we look at it as a way to using oracles to bring real-time data onto, let's say, the blockchains. And with those oracles, we can actually create a much more, let's say, deterministic guarantee. So when people are interacting with these sort of decentralized apps, we'll be able to actually create a sort of cryptographic truth, which previously, I think in the Web 1, Web 2 world, it was more on probabilistic type of guarantees, based on a brand, based on the intermediary. And so now where we want to help a lot of these companies, especially, is come up with a sort of trust minimized application. So with these applications, with high quality data providers, with high quality nodes, we're able to put this all together to really bring that intelligence and richness to the smart contracts. So effectively Web3 will be based on, let's say, cryptographic guarantees on the back end. And I think that opens up a whole new sort of implication about social contracts, how we interact from peer to peer, but also how governments and big institutions will interact with their user bases in the future. So that's a little bit of our perspective, Web3, but curious to hear what everyone else thinks too.
Sure. I mean, if anyone would like to add something here, feel free to speak. Yeah. Satya, team, or Tejas, about Web3, like a simple definition, or you would like to add something here?
Yeah, I can try to give it a shot from what I see. So when I look at Web 1, it was read. You could read and consume data. When you think about Web 2, it is read and write, where you can not just read data, you can write content, you can share content like Facebook. When it's about Web 3, I think of read, write, execute, and own in some ways. So you cannot just read and write data, but you can also own your piece of data and securely decide what you want to do with that data. So that's how Web 3 evolves from Web 2. And today in Web 2 world, you have a lot of companies like Facebook, Amazon, Twitters of the world that, own your data. So you're taking ownership back from them and putting it on a decentralized system where you can decide who owns the data. And also it's permissionless. No one can stop anyone from accessing any form of data. So that's another aspect of Web 3. So that's the simplest way someone had explained this to me. And that's why I'm like trying to just do justice to that explanation here.
Interesting. So basically, like two main important factors are here, which is like a decentralization of power and ownership of value. So we are going to discuss in detail about these all topics, but I would like to ask about like some core fundamental element of Web3 technology to Satya. If you can tell me about like what are the core elements of Web3 technology in terms of like blockchain or scaling solution, DeFi protocol, so and so.
Yeah, totally. Kind of jumping off what they just said there. I like to think a lot about what's the ideal stack, right? And so the ideal stack that I have in my mind is first you would start with the layer 1. So for those of you who don't know, layer 1 is kind of like the blockchain where everything gets recorded on. So Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche are all great layer 1s. And then on top of that, you would have like a scaling solution, maybe Polygon, or maybe some of the other layer 1s like Solana, right? And then this is where it gets interesting. Right now we start to talk about use case. So DeFi is where you can start to do the lending, the ownership layer, and now on top of that, where you can have the NFTs. And then on top of that, this is something I think the blockchain world hasn't really figured out yet, is the privacy layer. So think about like, I can share like in Web 2, right? I can share my email address to anyone, anywhere in the world, but they can't look at my email, right? That would be really bad if someone were able to look at my email, right? But now if I share my ENS domain name or like ENS or my public address, people can look at my transactions. That needs to be solved. So I think there's a lot of people working on solving that. And so once we solve that, I think there will be a really big idea in the virtual world. We're seeing that with like a lot of different virtual world companies like Decentraland, Sandbox, Crypto Voxels, GatherTown. And then in this virtual world, people will be able to play games. So you can and will be able to interact with every part of the stack. They can buy and sell NFTs. They can lend NFTs. They can do yield farming on NFTs, right? So it's very exciting. And these are some of the things I think that are part of the core elements of Web3.
Interesting. So my next question to Tejas is, so let's say like if we want to understand truly the graphs of the meaning of the Web3, it's also important to understand the history of the internet, right? And how Web3 differs from the previous version of the web that preceded it. So if you can go back to like in history, and if you can give us a little bit more insight, like how Web 1, Web 2 came into action, and now everyone is talking about Web 3.
Yes, sure. I'll try to do justice to it. So with Web 1, right, back in the 80s, when people started exploring the internet, Web 1 was generally served by static web pages. You had a client, you had a server, and you would just show people a web page. And there was, if you remember, $1 million web page as well back then, where you could buy a small tile in a web page for some $100 or something, and someone was sold an entire web page to companies with each tile having that company's information. So that was Web 1. Then what happened is, we realized that we needed social networks coming up. We had people trying to interact with each other or wanting to interact with each other. That led to the development of Web 2, where you have some form of control that you have given to these big organizations, and they are taking care of the data for you. Although they claim they encrypt it and all of that, but you're essentially putting your data in their hands. And Web 2 has now, reached a point where anyone like Twitter can decide to censor some information. Facebook can decide to censor some information. Then there is the idea of fake news that's floating around. So a lot of these companies have realized that it's going beyond their control. But still, the cloud, if you imagine, right, that's also centralized in some ways. So all the companies are realizing that their data is still centralized. And that led to the development of the blockchain initially. Blockchain was developed so that everyone could have a big distributed hash table or a big distributed database where you could view transactions, and you did not have to trust. It was a trustless, permissionless system that was developed. And it was initially developed so that you could have money not being controlled by governments. In fact, people who developed this were so scared that Satoshi Nakamoto, no one even knows who he or that group is. So they were scared for their lives because they thought, the government will come behind them because they're trying to change our idea of the money. And then taking that concept forward was Ethereum that said, let's not just think about transactions as money. Let's think of transactions as some amount of processes that are running. Money is one part of it. But if you can put smart contracts as part of the blockchain itself, that will enable more use cases. So Ethereum came into the fray after that point. And then, like Satya said, that there are scaling issues, because if you compare the Visas and the MasterCards of the world, they do 60,000 transactions every second. With Ethereum and Bitcoin, you actually end up doing in tens, not even in hundreds. And so many people came up with innovative ways of trying to fix that. They increased the block size of the Bitcoin, and that had BSV, the Bitcoin SV fork. But the core problem is it was not scalable. And proof of work had its own challenges because it tries to burn CPU cycles. So then the community came together and decided on, what's the next stage of evolution? Let us move away from proof of work to other ways in which we do not burn CPU cycle or burn energy. And then came proof of stake, delegated proof of stake, proof of history, many other variants of it. And today, along with the L1 solutions which Satya referred to, the base blockchain, there are scaling solutions built on top of it, such as Polygon. Solana is a blockchain in its own right. There is Flow, which is built by Dapper Labs. They are trying to solve the problem of scale so that we can actually replace the Visas and the MasterCards of the world. If done in the right way, we can replace them and reduce the energy consumption by 90% of what they are, ending up using. So that's how I've seen the evolution. And like, folks here are mentioning, the next stage of evolution for the blockchain is usability. I like to think of it in a very simple way. You think of your phone and your charger, right? Today, you have to plug your charger in the electricity socket and your phone gets charged. You do not care of what's generating electricity in the background. It could be hydroelectric power plant or whatever. In the same way, we do not have great usability or user experience of blockchain technology today. And a lot of companies are trying to focus on that so that people do not know that they're interacting with the blockchain. So that is what I think is the next evolution for it. Privacy and usability.
Thanks, Tejas. So my next question to Tim is like, what sort of role like all the blockchain can, as already like Tejas already mentioned about, we have like different different blockchain. They come up with like different use cases. So what sort of role here blockchain can perform in terms of like Web3?
For me, the blockchain it's underpinning Web3 economy, right? And this is where I use the word economy. That is the main difference with what you're doing with Web2. With Web2 is the companies, they have their databases and they want to create their transactions within their databases and they report within their own databases in their company reports. With blockchain, you're saying, well, no, we're going to replace the company databases with a single source of truth. And we're going to enable to ownership between what you own on your own address. And this is then something that goes across the companies, across the different individuals, and you can create different monetization models. So what are you doing with Web3 and blockchain technology is allowing value-based transactions to happen from point A to point B. And the different blockchain networks, they're fighting for market share because they believe that they have the best technology and the best solution out there. The one can scale a bit further. The one they want to do proof of work. The other, they say, no, it has to be a proof of stake. The one is saying, well, we're going to focus on financial transactions. The other are saying, well, no, we're going to focus on smart contracts. The other are saying, well, we're going to create a protocol for machine-to-machine economy. And I don't think there's going to be a single blockchain that is going to capture the entire market. There are going to be multiple blockchain networks that are going to exist. So we as a tech provider, what we want to do is support the public blockchains that we see. These are the ones that are going to be adopted because they're technically superior, or they have a better go-to-market strategy, or they have a better foundation behind it. And for us, we have a go-to-market in gaming because we see gaming has always been the industry with the biggest adoption of new technologies. And it just so happens that within gaming and metaverses, if you're looking at the millions of users that are coming to interact with a game or a metaverse, well, what they want to be able to do is own a digital asset. When they want to participate in it, they want to actually be part of that world. And that sense of ownership enables them to say, well, when I participate within this ecosystem, you're not monetizing against me as a consumer, you're treating me as a relevant stakeholder and you value me and being part of your community.
Interesting. So what sort of role Wendley plays here in Web3? So, I mean, you are chain agnostic. You are not bound to any individual chain, right? You guys are going multiple chain. You are on top provide API.
Yeah.
But what sort of role you guys going to play in next couple of years or decade to go in Web3?
First and foremost, it's being the blockchain technology provider, enabling businesses to tap into Web3 using APIs and microservices. These are typically what Web2 businesses know. When we see most of the businesses that are available today, they're not going to jump ship and going to throw away their own Web2 technology stack. No, they need a way into Web3 in the right way that says, this makes sense because I here have a business that is currently already being monetized and working efficiently, but I do want to improve and I don't want to be disrupted by new entrants into the market. So I do see there's going to be a big shift for existing companies today to embrace Web3 technology, but they're not going to do it by throwing everything away. So our APIs, they are currently being used by Shopify to enable them to have their NFT solution within the e-commerce platform. Also by multiple game studios such as the Sandbox. So we're onboarding millions of users at the moment. So about 30,000 users on a daily basis that we're onboarding for game studios. And this is where we are sitting in between full decentralized and a centralized solution. So we allow users to onboard using Google, Twitter, Facebook, but we give them a user-owned blockchain wallet. Then they can have the freedom to choose, how do I interact with the blockchain network? How do I interact with the application? And how do I want to set my settings and whether they want to trust Venly as a service provider or not?
Interesting. So I think like my next question is to Brent, but I think the key characterization of the Web3 are like decentralization, edge computing infrastructure, AI-driven, 3D graphics, transparent and open source, anonymity is also important, and also IoT. So everyone knows that like a whole DeFi is run by Chainlink oracles, right? And since the day one, since the providing the services, it's working day and night. So my specific question is like, what sort of role smart contract in the Web3 economy can play here?
Yeah, so I think going back to the other question, what's a core element of Web3? Well, we've talked blockchains, we've talked a bit about cryptocurrencies, but I mean, the other one too, I would say that Chainlink heavily is involved is smart contracts and oracles, right? And if you want the oracles to reach, or let's say a smart contract to reach its full potential, it needs to interact with data and systems outside of the blockchain, right? So the whole DeFi case, which made it very successful, is that we're able to connect real world data, and that could be a simple price feed, what's Bitcoin to USD, and be able to provide that in a decentralized, tamper-proof way, where effectively, you could provide that sort of cryptographic truth, that certainty that, you knew that was the price point given through the consensus. So I think the Oracle piece is the middleware that people often don't talk about, which is powering a lot of the blockchains and the infrastructure and the whole ecosystem effectively. I think the other thing that what we see also in the Web3, which makes it interesting, is that these oracles are now developing into decentralized services. So you're doing compute, not just a simple data feed, but think of verifiable randomness. So when you need that as a decentralized service for minting coins or NFT, you might need that for the gaming industry. You can think of also proof of reserve as another decentralized service that Chainlink is offering to help support stablecoins, where you need to see how much collateral is actually there. So there's a number of things I think in the background where in order to really drive that Web3 ecosystem, the smart contracts, enriching the smart contracts, getting the oracles to really enable the smart contract to the full potential. That's essentially what Chainlink is doing. And I think that's been part of the success in us helping the DeFi community be so successful in the last 12 to 18 months.
Interesting. I mean, I can also say like when I read about the white paper of like Chainlink in 2017, I was like talking with one of my colleagues, like if these guys can do it, it would be like really great. And I'm totally agree with you, Brent. Like the people really misunderstood, like they just don't want to talk about like this Oracle thing. And you can see like whole DeFi is running on, I would say some sort of like 70-80% is running on Chainlink oracles without any kind of problem since the day of inception. But yeah, thanks a lot for your input here. But my next question to Satya is like also GatherTown was started as just a fun, as the founder mentioned, and then recently you guys raised like Series B from Sequoia. So congratulations for that. But what sort of role you guys are aiming for here in Web3 economy?
Yeah, very good question. So the central thesis of Gather is facilitating rich human connection, right? And so Web 2 didn't really get P2P interactive experiences. It's very good for async conversation, right? Look at Twitter, look at Discord, but interactive, rich communication is tough on Web 2. And so we think the metaverse will be all about doing things with your peers. Today, we're seeing this in remote work. So our entire HQ, we're from 13 different countries. We all operate in the metaverse. It's pretty fun. We like walk around. It's like Pokemon, right? So we walk around, we talk to each other, we play games, we do dungeon escapes, and we're really empathize with each other, right? During the tough times, and then celebrate each other's successes. So remote work is like today. How are we bringing people together in Web 2 and Web 3, right? The ethos of Web 3 is all people hire contributors, part-time people, full-time, core contributors are from all around the world. So having that place, having that home in the metaverse is pretty amazing. In the future, if you think about it, when people are researching topics, so let's say I'm studying about crypto or I'm researching about a biotech idea, in Web 2, I'm doing that by myself, right? I'm like going through problems, maybe facing a bug, like my mind is going crazy, I have all these questions, but I'm doing all of this by myself. In Gather, in the metaverse, you'll be doing it with other people, right? And you can see communities starting to form around these NFTs, right? So the Bored Ape Club, the CryptoPunks, maybe they all come together or parts of their community come together and they research topics together. Think about how cool it could be if you could like, you know, forage the newest consensus mechanism or just have like relaxed brainstorming sessions. I think like video platforms today are more like scheduled and everything is like, there's like a want. But in something like Gather, it's very relaxed and it feels like a brainstorming session. And the last big point that I have is blockchain feels like one big hackathon, right? And so part of this hackathon is taking place on Twitter. People are continuously like tweeting and replying, and ideas are conceived right on Twitter, right? But that again is async. And so for protocols, some sync conversation is very powerful, right? So you can have all these like builders who have all these ideas in their head and now putting them together in a sync time in a hackathon, which we've seen as like a really big, exciting use for different protocols is very exciting to bring people together in different ways.
Interesting.
Can I jump in here
Sure.
for a question for Satya? When I hear you talking, for me, it sounds like that metaverse equals Web3. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the metaverse is a bridge to Web3,
Yeah.
right?
Because for me, a metaverse, that can be 100, or a virtual world, that can be on Web 2. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that the metaverse is on Web 2 or Web 3. But I would say when you're talking about metaverses that connect with Web 3, the reasons for that is to have different people to make a transaction. And
Right.
that transaction between one person to the other person, that is what you would typically push towards Web3 technology. But if it's just interacting with each other in the metaverse, in the virtual economy, in the virtual world, like chatting with each other, I don't see the need to bring that to blockchain technology. Or am I missing something in what you're saying?
So yeah, so Gather in its core is a Web 2 product, right? The metaverse, like you said, is a Web 2 idea. But we think that bringing the right people together, like what is Discord, right? It's a communication tool, and very many Web 3 projects use Discord. And so similarly, we think of ourselves as a layer on top of Discord. So yeah, maybe in the future, there will be opportunity to become fully decentralized and build all of our technology on Web 3. But we think today it's best built on Web 2 for scalability purposes, right?
Yeah, indeed. So that's what I mean, right? So for me, if you're going to use Web3 technology, you want to use it for the right purposes. And that is, unless I'm mistaken, and people please disagree with me, it's for value-based transactions. And how you define value, that doesn't necessarily have to be money, right? It can be a contract, that can be a certificate, but you want to transfer something of value from one person to the other. If it's just to have communication line, that's not a value transaction, in my opinion. So, yeah.
But I think just to jump in, I think we would agree that the metaverse is an emerging pillar of part of the Web3 ecosystem. It does have, in this case, especially in the gaming use case, there are NFTs, there is digital assets, And there is the ability also, there's a value behind a lot of these digital assets. And I think also as we start to couple them with, let's say, cross-chain interoperability, and we start to come up with bridging layers and things like this, the ability to transfer value between different, let's say, Web3 decentralized gaming in the sort of this metaverse, we can change those assets and move them across different blockchains. So I think the metaverse probably right now, as it was proposed, is maybe not a compelling use case or superior use case from Web 2, but I think we can all see that within the next, let's say, 12 months, together with NFTs, digital assets, we can see with cross-chain interoperability that this metaverse will become something much more compelling than what we've seen already in the last, let's say, 5 years.
No, but there, what you're saying, digital assets. Satya, you were saying we're doing the same thing like Pokemon Go. If I get all of the assets, all of the Pokemons within the game, for me, those are assets. And if I then want to be able to say, me as a player, I want to transfer my assets to someone else, and the metaverse or the application allows that, they stimulate that, that is 100% ideal to bring that to Web3 and to blockchain.
Totally, 100%.
Interesting. Regarding the CCIP, I have another question for you, Brent. But before that, I would like to ask specifically to Tejas about like how anyone can create the presence on Web3, because Satya already mentioned like Twitter is flooding with like, and people say like CT, right? Crypto Twitter. And you just tweet one thing and there will be like 100 of people writing you back on like what you are looking for, right? So they're like a infinite number of flow of information, but how to access that data and you can make it useful for it. So how about like how to make our presence in Web3? How anyone can make their presence on Web3?
I mean, the simplest way that people are trying to get their presence on Web3 is exchanging NFTs today. People are buying NFTs, selling NFTs, creating some asset of value and putting it out there on Web3. But there are other companies as well that are, taking a different stab at it. Like if you imagine if today we live on Earth, right? Like, and we are thinking of a future where some of us can go on Mars. Now, if you go to Mars and let's say you want to access Facebook.com or Twitter.com, the round trip latency itself will be in minutes. So when you load a web page, it'll take a long time before you can see what you've loaded, right? So companies are using Web3 technologies to build sharing of data in such a way that, once you go to Mars, you can actually share the data using P2P systems built on blockchain and exchange information there. So that's another way like companies are imagining Web3. As an individual, I feel that what will happen is the only route that I am seeing today, which has taken a lot of which has grown, is NFTs, digital art, and some form of asset creation. That's how people are entering Web3. But again, like I said, I imagine there will be a lot of utility apps around us. For example, cars that you buy or your homes that you buy, all of those deeds will actually end up being on the blockchain in the future. And you can then use the blockchain to, view them, trade your car, or look at the history of your car, the mileage of your car, or the land that you bought. So that's how I feel that this will get a lot of people into Web3.
But maybe just to build on that, I think a lot of people are already in Web3, right? If you look at a MetaMask, yes. I think the numbers they've been coming out with, they're well over 20 million. But more importantly, if you own crypto, you're already in Web3. You're already starting to understand the principles of, a tokenization. You're starting to already understand the NFT use case is a good one because now you're understanding digital assets. And I think many enterprises, people forget, have been in the blockchain world for actually a number of years. It's just the difference is now, I think with DeFi, it's a public decentralized blockchain, whereas many enterprises were in permission private blockchains, working with R3 or Hyperledger and things like this. And now they're starting to see also, hey, a public blockchain actually might have a superior use case for us, especially if we can do things like cross-chain interoperability, because obviously, as we alluded to, each blockchain has certain characteristics and features, which gives it an advantage, which, hey, if I want to build that ultimate use case, I'm probably going to need 2 or 3 different blockchains to make it work, right? And I think that's how people are already getting involved, both as consumers, but also enterprises are really starting to say, hey, let me just become a node operator. That's a very low threshold. Get in as a Chainlink node operator, for instance. Get in the game, you understand the tokenization, you understand the economics. And then from there, I think the other thing that we alluded to was data provision, right? So the one key piece that we're missing here is data, right? Instead of building data lakes and centralizing it, there's companies that we're talking to now. We're just saying, hey, let's put it on a public blockchain. Maybe, we can monetize that data, but also we can also have other companies in the ecosystem come up with new risk products or come up with a new use case, which, previously to let's say, I think how we've been thinking for 20 years, that opens up whole new possibilities, which we haven't seen before.
Interesting. Yeah, Tim, go ahead if you would like to share that.
I was just thinking about business models, right? Tejas, you're from Netflix. What I would think for the end users, the consumers that you're monetizing against, right? This is streaming as a service. I don't think there's quite an ambition for Netflix to use Web3 technology to change that model, because this is a model that most people like, and they don't necessarily want to own as a single movie or a series, because they get a whole plethora of films and series to watch at the very low threshold rate. So that licensing model, I think, works for everyone. So where do you see Web3 going to be used within Netflix? Is that more for the distribution of IP? And
actually, yeah, so that's a good question, Tim. So Netflix currently is not exploring Web3 at all. So that's not something that Netflix has touched at this point. And you're correct. Like today, we do not see much value provided to us by using the blockchain, right? Like we don't want to retrofit the blockchain into our use case because that is detrimental to the entire community in some ways. So we don't see that happening. But what I see in the future happening is not with regards to Netflix, but in general, right? Like people like owning collectibles, and collectibles could be in any form. Today it is in digital art. Tomorrow it could be a piece of a song or a piece of a movie, which you probably want to just hold on to a video segment and you want to call it your own. Recently, we saw that in the Australian Open, they actually mapped the entire Australian Open court with squares that were cut out in the virtual land. And the price of each square was determined by whether the winning shot happened on that square or not. So there are very innovative use cases that people are coming up with when it comes to having collectibles. And I see that in the future, a lot of the companies will try to jump onto the bandwagon of the meta or of Web3 by using this data that they have collected and providing it to users. So that also has a side effect of building the company's brand value and calling it a Web3 company instead of a normal big behemoth of a Web2 world. So that's how I see it. But Netflix doesn't, at this point, Netflix is not planning to enter into it anytime soon.
Yeah. Maybe sorry,
sure.
go ahead.
Sure, Satya,
I'm just going to say with Netflix, I think it's interesting because you probably are a classic Web2 use case, right? That absolutely.
Yes.
But I think, the focus should also be on, who's building the Web3 business use case. And if you look at things like parametric insurance, right? And providing crop insurance in emerging markets, which hasn't been available, we can do this in a frictionless way. And, using data, weather data, for instance, putting it through an Oracle, create a smart contract, and you can offer a farmer in Kenya for, let's say $50 with his smartphone, he can get an insurance contract he's never had. If you think about that, when the contract is triggered, he also has liquidity, right? And so the minute if he has a crop failure because there's been a drought and the smart contract immediately executes, also we're giving liquidity, also we're getting stability to people who haven't had that in part of the world. So I think the NFT use case in the digital arts is interesting, but I think more compelling would be how we're creating whole new business models, which is actually helping the world, right? In sense of figuring out whether I want my Bored Ape or my Crypto Kitty, right? So I think there are other things which we could focus, which are truly Web3 companies like Arbol and EtherRisk, which are actually building these products now, which we haven't been able to see from, let's say, the classic Web1, Web2 type of insurance businesses. I'll add yet, because I think that there is a move happening now.
Indeed. Satya, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, you all touch upon collectibles and gaming. So right now, like when you buy an NFT or a different card in one of these platforms, you either may use it in the platform or you may try to sell it at a higher price in the future. But I think we need to add more utility to all of these NFTs. What's the point of owning a Bored Yacht Ape, right? So in the future, we see that hopefully with Gather events, with token gated rooms and spaces, people will be able to enter, verifying that they have some NFT and meet other people in the community or meet the creator, right? So recently we saw, or like the Bored Apes partnered with Adidas, and there's probably like some like exciting partnership happening, and you could see that maybe there's like a new thing they drop, or a new shoe, like a Bored Ape shoe, and they want to get the Bored Ape community's feedback, and so you can do that with a Gather event in space. So very exciting to kind of see the utility of NFTs coming up.
It's an interesting thing. No, go ahead.
Tim. Tim, go ahead. You guys are making my work lesser, so I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. So 100% agree. There needs to be more utility to an NFT, right? So NFT can represent ownership, but it should also give an in-game experience of a digital asset. What we see is we have clients that are coming from e-commerce space, like brands, and then we also have clients that are building their metaverses. Right now, what is the digital landscape? If you want to have, for example, an asset on Snoop Dogg on the Sandbox, that's a good example. And probably everybody has seen it in the news. For that to actually happen, Snoop Dogg needs to have a relationship with the Sandbox, and the Sandbox is in fact the owner of the NFT contract, right? Snoop Dogg is not at that moment in time not the owner. There's probably a rev share between the two to make that happen. In the future, what we see is the brands, they're going to own the NFT contracts, but they still want to have that NFT specifically to represent an in-game asset in a metaverse. Then what we need to do is be able to map that NFT to have a representation of different assets within the different metaverses, because one metaverse could be pixelated, look at the Sandbox, another metaverse, for example, Vulcan Forge, it's more 3D animated, but the one NFT should still have a representation of both. These are the things that we're trying to help our clients to overcome. And one of the initiatives that we're raising for that is the Meta Ring. And there we're working with 15 different partners to say, well, we're going to help build a community. We're going to help to also align the engagement of the community to come to these metaverses, but also that the smart contract or the NFT contract from a particular brand that wants to communicate with multiple vendors, in this case, metaverses, they can in fact still be the owner of that single smart contract.
Interesting. I think that's also some of our question. One of the question for audience, like they were asking about like any business and use cases more than or other than transaction of value in the Web 3.0. So I think Brent already pressed that side a little bit with parametric insurance, Etherisk, and Arabol is doing. And I mean, feel free to take the lead here if you think like, I mean, whenever we talk about any value proposition or like there is always transaction right here, because like we don't want to trust, but we want to trust on basically mathematics. So I mean, do you see, I mean, feel free to answer any of you, like do you see like other than transaction, what would be the business plans look like in next 5 years, like how the business plans getting developed and whole space is evolving in Web 3.0?
I'll take a first stab at it. I mean, I've already given, I think, the decentralized insurance case with parametric insurance. I think probably one of the other big use cases that everyone's trying to get their head around is carbon, right? So the single biggest crisis we have in as a society and planet, everyone has different pieces of this puzzle, which somehow we have to kind of pull together. And I think there is an excellent case using blockchain technology together with smart contracts to actually build carbon markets, right? And with carbon markets, that's something people can actually use and companies can use. So I think there's a business case which, there's a lot of brain power going to right now where people are trying to figure out how do we use this and how do we use this with innovative blockchain Web 3.0 technology. I think obviously, we're going to move from DeFi has made a fantastic case on the finance side. So we're going to see more decentralized finance as, more people become accustomed and comfortable with cryptocurrencies, digital assets. I think we talked about NFTs. I mean, as a use case, that opens up things such as, real estate, right? Once you start moving DeFi, you can move into derivatives. So there's a lot of things happening here where I think there's a lot of very compelling use cases beyond what's already happening on, let's say, private permission ones on supply chain economics and things like that. So yes, this is just the beginning. We're in the early days.
Interesting. So as also Sergi mentioned, so like so many times, like we can see like 10x growth in DeFi from here, right, Brent? So I would like to ask specific question about CCIP because I think everyone is excited about this thing. So if you can a little bit, please don't go in more technical terms, but maybe you can talk about like at high level so our audience can understand what is CCIP and how it will evolve in Web 3.0.
So CCIP is sort of the next evolution of where we've gone from like data feeds to hybrid smart contracts to cross-chain interoperability protocol. The idea simply here is that, as I said, we want to be able to seamlessly, in a secure way, be able to move value or to move, let's say, transactions and data across multiple blockchains. This is incredibly difficult, but I think we're already in beta with Celsius, for instance, where you can think of wrap token assets, moving them from one blockchain to another. So CCIP, we see it as also the beginning of what TCP/IP was to internet in the Web 1 world, right? So once you have that protocol, that communication protocol, you can interact with other different protocols, and that will make things much more fluid, much more scalable, and you can take advantage of the different, let's say, features and properties and characteristics of, let's say, layer 2s with layer 1s, and that it's an infinite amount of combinations, and effectively that's what CCIP is going to solve that problem.
Interesting. So my next question to Satya is like, would you like to convey some of the message from your team, like how the team of Together is thinking about Web 3.0?
Yeah. So like I was saying today, it's just at its core, it's a communication tool, right? And we see that Web3, some sync-based communication is very powerful. But in the future, like you were saying, Tim, if people hold the NFTs, they need to take their NFT into different virtual worlds and start playing with them, right? So in the future, and kind of the use case business model question there, creators today, they're event hosts. They make beautiful spaces and they bring their community together. But in the future, creators will just be like game developers or game designers, and they'll be able to make full-on games right in Gather, and then they can add support for the NFTs so that people can like jump into the Gather space and they can maybe have their NFT as their avatar or have their NFT as their pet, and they can like walk around and unlock certain parts of the space via their NFT. So we've seen a little bit of this with like Dungeon Escapes, Magic the Gathering spaces, and we think that these game-like experiences will bring people together and facilitate that rich human connection.
And this is a good point that you're making, right? So what you're saying is you're going to have an NFT that's going to be available in the game, but you're going to allow the properties to be updated of that specific NFT. Going from level 0, for example, to level 10. And because it goes from 0 to 10, 0 is a very common NFT versus level 10 is a more scarce NFT because it was used within the game. Then are you looking at the specific token standard that you're implementing? Like, for example, typically ERC 721 is used for collectibles. There you don't upgrade the metadata in the NFT versus 1155, which is more for a gaming use case. There you would.
Yeah, great question. This is definitely a future use case. This is something a lot of our customers ask us about right now. Many of our customers are Web 2. So we have to like, it's like this dance. We have to be very careful with this dance, right? But definitely something we're thinking about.
Yeah, we typically move on the 1155 standard. So just to think about it within the gaming philosophy, within the gaming use case, I think it makes the most sense. But still be able, because there's a slight definition that we changed in the 1155, and that is that we can actually mark an asset as unique or not. Think about it as an avatar that needs to level up. There you can mark it as unique. You're going to retain the scarcity mindset versus you're going to need utilities, wood or rocks or anything else. There, that's typically something that you're going to say, well, this is so common, it's going to be available unlimited and abundantly. So that doesn't need to be unique. One piece of wood and another piece of wood are exactly the same within the game.
Interesting. Shall we move further, or if anyone of have any topic, you can go ahead. I mean, okay. So my next question to Tejas, which is, who stands to benefit the most from Web 3.0? So, like, who will be the sole benefiter of Web 3.0?
I think people, in simple terms, I think taking the power back from centralized organizations, having control over your data, monetizing your data really for yourself. And today, when you click on a Google web page or any web page, you actually give them your data and they provide you ads. You can actually choose in the future if you want ads. What kind of ads do you want? So you monetize, you are having control over your own data. That is what is the biggest benefit of Web3. And also having no layers, like no centralized parties that you have to go through to communicate or transact with any person or any entity. That is a big win. Like today, you can send money to any part of the world with very low costs, which was not possible in the Web2 world. That's the other part. And third is in general, improving the collaboration of the world around us. So how can we use these models to help people that are in different parts of the world empathize with each other, as Satya put it, and learn from each other's experiences? That's what Web3 will bring. That's what we hope Web3 will bring. So yeah,
I think very, very true. It's going to be the people, but it's a double-edged sword, because if you give the power to the people, the biggest winners are also going to be the people. But just a stupid example, if I would send Bitcoin from one address, my address, to someone else, and I mistakenly send it to another address, there's not anybody going to help me retrieve that money back. So take that in mind. You can also be the biggest loser in the space as well.
So basically, we are talking about like Newton's law, every action is reaction, and let's talk about consequences of the Web 3.0, right? So we talk about like almost 53 minutes about Web 3.0 disadvantages. Why don't we talk about 7 minutes, like at high level disadvantage of Web 3.0? Maybe let's start with Brent.
So the question was what for Web 3.0 or?
Yeah. So what are the consequences or the disadvantage of Web 3.0? I'm sure we will have some problem or.
Okay. Yeah. The consequences. I think. Look, I think people are quickly realizing that Web 3 is approaching the same speed, the same efficiency, the same low cost as web systems. But the difference between Web 2.0 and 3.0 is that we're talking about trust minimization, and we're talking about cryptographic guarantees that most Web 2.0 does not offer. And that's I think a fundamental difference. It sounds very abstract. It sounds kind of theoretical, but I think, if you look at where Web 3 is going and what we're able to do, all those issues that people say, hey, it's not fast enough, it's not efficient enough, gas fees and things, that's all being solved, or that will be resolved. But the fundamental difference is the trust minimization and the fact that you can now get cryptographic guarantees based on that data, based on that digital ownership, whether it be an NFT, whether it be parametric insurance. I think that's the difference of where Web3 is going. And that's what is going to make it successful.
Team, Tejas, Satya.
I think we just went down that road, but Satya, maybe you can take this one.
For sure. I think, many people are still in the Coinbase kind of centralized part of the world, right? And so I think going from like Coinbase to MetaMask is like a big jump. I've talked to so many friends about this, and that jump they fear. It's very fearful. And we hope that in the future that you'll take that jump with your peers, with other people who are trying to take that jump as well. So I think the disadvantage is that we're in Web3, but we're still on a centralized exchange. And in the future, hopefully you'll like learn with your peers. And we hope that you use Gather to do that.
I would just add there already are decentralized use cases around yield, for instance, AVA, right? And I agree that there's an adoption curve that we have to make things easier and lower the threshold for people to have digital wallets to make them feel comfortable. I think that's what Venly is also contributing to in that world. But just imagine if Google comes up with a crypto wallet, and they build it into their browser, that's something that could potentially drive adoption in a completely different way, which we haven't seen, or exponentially. So there are decentralized use cases. I do agree there's a lot of centralization in the system, so with CeFi, but I think more and more people are also getting comfortable with the yield as a use case for DeFi.
Yes, adoption is also the big topic here. Like, we are close to like 8 billion people. Tejas, I will give you a floor.
That's okay.
Please.
Yeah.
So basically, like, we are 8 billion people, and Brent, you really touched the point where like the adoption is still not there. Like, in terms of like, we need the huge adoption, right? And as you mentioned, like if Google or any Facebook or Apple start giving like a wallet integrated in their product, then I think this will boost massive adoption. But where do we see like in like this actual things happening? It's coming down to the road, like it's 3 to 5 years, or like when is it happening? How far we are from there?
Well, I would argue where it's happening, Web3 is already happening, right, in different forms. I think also, coming from the world of Web 1, it's on the same curve if you think of adoption. If you look at the same level of interest, especially once it crosses over into enterprise, and if you can monetize data, just think of how many companies and enterprises are sitting on data lakes with all kinds of data, which instead of trying to keep it, if they put that onto blockchains and they start rethinking and reimagining how I can monetize it, I think that will accelerate. So the last thing I would say is that the use cases are getting better, right? So if you think in use case terms, each use case is getting more sophisticated. It's getting superior from the previous one. And I think in that case, the adoption, depending on how you look at it, is already there to one extent. But I think if you think mass market, mass enterprise, we're probably within 3 to 5 years to absolutely where Web3 will be on par to probably what we've seen with Web2.
Sure. Tejas, please go ahead. You can combine both the questions here.
I think that some of the consequences of Web3 are, one, that people are trying to retrofit Web3 into everything today, and that has implications on the environment. With a lot of technologies, there are some side effects, and we need to be very mindful of, what's the contribution in terms of energy to the environment when we try to retrofit Web3 into any form of application. That's one. And the other is people actually are trying to make a quick buck out of it by, buying NFTs, hyping NFTs. And I think that over time, a lot of people, 99% of the people that enter this market without a lot of information lose money, because they purchase an NFT based on hype and then they lose a lot of money. So I think that is another, disadvantage. I would say that lack of knowledge being permeated to other people. And I feel that digital art is great and collectibles is amazing, but I feel that there are a lot of utility apps, the world that we see around us, that still need to be adapted and built on top of on the blockchain. And that will provide a higher value than what we have currently. So totally agree with Brent and Tim here and Satya that, we are still in the nascent stages. A lot of great work is being done, but there's a lot of work yet to be done to make Web3 more mainstream.
If I could just add, because you mentioned the speculation use case, right? Which, obviously the cryptocurrencies have got a lot of excitement stuff, but that's why we talk about parametric insurance, because it doesn't involve a token, right?
Yes.
And so it's a very simple business model where, changing the data, instead of looking at my phone going, hey, is it going to rain? Do I need an umbrella? Well, all of a sudden that data could have economic value and completely determine or change someone's life by creating a whole new insurance product without any tokenization, without any of the cryptocurrency. That I think is what we try to focus on, because, obviously the speculation, I don't think is doing anyone any favors at this point in sense of really driving all the goodness that the Web3 technologies can provide.
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate your time for joining us and talking about Web 3.0 and difference between Web 3.0 and Web 2.0. So, but fundamentally, basically, Web 3.0 term was used during the .com era by HTTP pioneer Tim Berners. And he later also described Web3 as less trust, more truth. So basically, we are wrapping here our panel event. And for our audience here, you must have if you are selected, then you must have get the email from us to join our private session on Gather Town. And we are going to also, you would have opportunity to talk with the speakers directly and ask the question. So once again, thanks a lot, everyone. And have a nice evening and see you next time.